Hello, you are watching Shalom World News. I'm Marina Grosser from Washington, D.C. Here are the latest headlines from around the world. On Wednesday, irate Muslim mobs attacked Christian communities and set fire to a number of churches in Jaranwala town in Pakistan's Faisalabad province. The incident took place after two Christians were accused of desecrating Islam's holy book. Up to 15 churches have been destroyed, and hundreds of Christian homes have also been destroyed. Thousands of Christians have been forced to flee because of the attacks, said a statement released by the Catholic relief organization Aid to the Church in Need International. Over 100 houses were set on fire, forcing authorities to launch an immediate evacuation drive. Local Christians Rocky Masih and Raja Masih were accused of insulting the Quran, which is considered blasphemy in Pakistan and carries a life sentence. This led to mayhem in Jaranwala. The United States said resorting to violence or the use of threats is never an acceptable form of expression. Washington has urged Islamabad to carry out an impartial probe without obstructing the peaceful expression of one's opinions. In the United States, a federal court of appeals came out with a verdict on Wednesday to keep the chemical abortion pill Mifepristone available with certain restrictions. The ruling of the three judges of the Fifth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals has brought to an end the availability of Mifepristone by mail. It also mandates that it ought to be administered in the presence of a doctor. As per the ruling, the drug can be taken through the 7th week of pregnancy as against the earlier 10 weeks. The new restrictions will not go into effect immediately, as the Supreme Court has issued an injunction earlier permitting access to the chemical abortion pill until the case was completely settled. Last month, a U.S. District Court judge in Texas ruled against the Food and Drug Administration, saying that the approval process for the chemical abortion pill was improper. In the U.S. state of Ohio, police arrested a man who is accused of trying to set fire to a Catholic church in Willoughby and vandalizing it. Police said 30-year-old Eric Beck of Painesville went to the Immaculate Conception Church through a chapel open at all hours and vandalized it. He also knocked over and damaged a statue of the Virgin Mary. Investigators said the act of vandalism caused damage to the tune of $20,000. The assailant carried out the attack in an intoxicated state and fled the property after desecrating it, said the police. He was later apprehended by investigators. Police reported that Beck was taken into custody on felony counts of breaking and entering, vandalism, and arson. His bond was set at $50,000 when he was arraigned on Monday. The most prominent ecumenical association of Nigeria has accused a Muslim organization of rejecting the Lagos State Governor's list of cabinet nominees. The Joint Muslim Forum, or JMF, rejected the list of Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu, citing the underrepresentation of the community. The list had 39 nominees, of which 31 were Christians and 8 were Muslims. The chairman of the Christian Association of Nigeria in Lagos, Reverend Stephen Adegbite, said that JMF's remarks were distasteful and the way out of line. He said it was uncharitable for any group to turn to such a list of nominees into a religious conversation. The Reverend also reminded the Muslim group members that the governor brought out the list after relevant consultations and was purely based on merit. The chairman of the Christian Association of Nigeria also cited how presidential candidates on the Muslim tickets in the general elections had the full support of the Christian community. Chaldean Patriarch Louis Raphael Sacco has said that there is a bitter struggle in Iraq between those who are attempting to establish a sovereign state founded on law and justice, and those who are fighting to accelerate chaos and displacement. The Patriarch is currently residing in Iraq, Kurdistan, after he left his seat in Baghdad when the president canceled the decree recognizing the authority and role of the Chaldean Patriarch. It was in a surprise stroke that President Abdul Rashid disavowed a centuries-old tradition by striking the highest Catholic authority in the country. Cardinal Sacco also found in Iraqi Kurdistan a safe and dignified place to protect the Christian community. He also attacked corrupt people who sought money and limited people's rights, freedoms, and dignity. The fight of the Cardinal against the attempt to weaken the essence of the Christian presence in Iraq comes after the flight of believers from Mosul and the Nineveh plain to Kurdistan during the Islamic State occupation. A U.S. federal appeals court on Tuesday overturned the dismissal of a pro-life foundation's lawsuit by a lower district court. The Frederick Douglass Foundation versus District of Columbia lawsuit claimed discriminatory selective enforcement of defacement laws against pro-life protesters in Washington, D.C. over their chalk message on a public sidewalk. There were allegations that local authorities treated pro-life protesters harsher than activists associated with the Black Lives Matter movement. The case has been sent to the district court for further proceedings, where the city will have the chance to present its own evidence in opposition to the pro-life protesters' assertions. The Frederick Douglass Foundation and Students for Life of America filed a lawsuit against the District of Columbia in 2021 after two demonstrators were detained for writing "Black Preborn Lives Matter" on a sidewalk during a rally in August 2020. The organization said Washington, D.C.'s selective enforcement of the rules was unconstitutional. The foundation claimed that both the First and Fifth Amendment rights of the demonstrators were infringed. Catholic prelates of Kenya are exhorting principals of church-run schools to maintain high moral standards in the institutions. The bishops made the appeal on August 15th during the official opening of the 8th edition of Catholic Schools Principals Association in the capital, Nairobi. Addressing the principals, Bishop Mark Wamuyoka of Bungoma Diocese said Catholic institutions place a lot of emphasis on education as it is one of the most critical pillars of the Church. The prelate urged the heads of schools not to shy away from witnessing Christ and to set high standards for teachers. He said that witnessing the Lord will help them nurture learners to grow emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually. The event is underway at the University of Eastern Africa, and it is organized under the auspices of the Kenya Conference of Catholic Bishops' Commission for Education and Religious Education. Archaeological excavations in Rome have identified what are believed to be the parts of the theater of Emperor Nero, which is known for his persecution of apostles Peter and Paul and the early Christians. The excavations were carried out in the inner courtyard of the Palazzo della Rovere, housing the headquarters of the Equestrian Order of the Holy Sepulchre of Jerusalem. They were undertaken by the Special Superintendents of Archaeology of Rome. Archaeologists found elegantly carved marble columns, decorations, and service spaces. It is part of the estate of the Julio-Claudian family, where Emperor Caligula built a large circus for horse races and Nero constructed a theater. The construction of the theater is mentioned by Pliny, Suetonius, and Tacitus. It is in this theater that he rehearsed his poetic and musical performances. It was Nero who unleashed his fury on Christians after blaming them for the fire of Rome in AD 64. The Director of Operations and Advocacy for Humanitarian Affairs Coordination Office has made it clear that the UN was unable to identify the movement of people and goods along the Lachin corridor connecting Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh in Azerbaijan. Edom Warsornu said that the organization was aware of ongoing reports of food and medicine shortages and disruption of energy supplies needed to keep health and water facilities operational. Since December, Azerbaijan troops have closed the corridor, literally cutting off supplies to the 120,000 Christian Armenians residing in the contested enclave. The International Committee of the Red Cross has not been able to transport humanitarian assistance to the region for several weeks. Since July, medical supplies have not been brought to the enclave, although medical evacuations have arrived. It was in November 2020 that a ceasefire in Nagorno-Karabakh was agreed by Azerbaijan and Armenia under the auspices of Russia. The Catholic Church in South Africa is filing a class action lawsuit against mining firms on behalf of coal miners with lung disease. The Southern African Bishops' Conference said lawyers submitted documents to South Africa's High Court on Tuesday in this regard. Archbishop of Cape Town, Stephen Brislin, said former miners are no longer members of trade unions and therefore lack the means and capacity to seek legal recourse from large companies responsible for their lung disease. The church said it facilitated the case after mine workers approached it for assistance. The complaint was brought on behalf of 17 mine workers and names mining giant BHP, South 32, and Seriti as defendants. All miners who have worked for these firms since 1965 developed lung disease. The lawsuit also seeks compensation for the dependents of employees who passed away due to the illnesses brought on by coal dust. Euthanasia in Canada's Quebec province has marked 7% of deaths, the highest in the world. Head of the province's Commission on End-of-Life Care, Dr. Michael Bureau, said there are too many instances of euthanasia being administered and that there have been a number of so-called medical assistance in dying, also named MAID, deaths, that have not complied with all the conditions of the legislation. In an email sent to doctors, he had to remind them that old age is not a serious and incurable condition as mandated for a legal MAID death. He insisted that the opinion of a second doctor is a necessary requirement for medically assisted suicide. Radio Canada said that MAID deaths were now increasing to about 7%, and at this rate, over 5,000 people will have used it in 2023, compared to the 3,663 last year. A South Sudanese Catholic bishop has said that the visit of Vatican Secretary of State to his diocese is really significant. Bishop Nyoro Mayok said that the visit of Cardinal Pietro Parolin gives hope and demonstrates the love, closeness, and solidarity of the Church with the suffering people. The prelate said that the Cardinal's visit will help people understand that working together will give them the strength to move forward and to build their nation. Malakal City is now hosting more than 40,000 South Sudanese who were forced to flee from Sudan when civil war broke out there. The Vatican top official welcomed the refugees on Wednesday and accompanied them on the final leg of their journey by boat. About 1.5 million South Sudanese are in Sudan seeking better prospects, but the fighting has forced many of them to return to their home country. And those are your latest headlines. Join us again tomorrow for more. You can also visit swnews.org for more updates. Shalom.